Welcome to Rebetting Capitalism, where tech, social entrepreneurship, and impact meet to create the businesses that will lead to a sustainable future. I'm your host, Claudia Thomas. Today, we have Gaby, founder of Reboot, an upcycling system for sports clubs. As the daughter of the Inter Miami FC owner, she witnessed firsthand how around 60% of the football kit produced is never used, and it's actually just destroyed. In this conversation, we first talk about kit waste and how Reboot is aiming to solve this problem. Then, we talk about the other 6 MLS clubs Reboot has worked with and discuss how to scale Reboot so that it can have a bigger impact. Finally, we talk about the broader fashion industry and how to drive systemic change. Join us to explore how Gaby's work at Reboot is transforming the kit waste management in the sports industry. Gaby, this is a very special conversation. As you know, I have been following Reboot since inception, up until what it has become now. You are an example of seeing an opportunity in front of your eyes and going for it. So, before getting into what is Reboot, what was the pivotal moment that made you realize that you wanted to solve the sports waste problem?
Yeah, so I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Gaby, the founder of Reboot. I grew up in Miami and played football or soccer, however you call it, my entire life. And it's always been a passion of mine, but I never really saw it as something I would dive into in my career. But during COVID, I actually had firsthand access to see the behind the scenes of a major league soccer club based in Miami. So Inter Miami, my family is part of the ownership group. So I was again able to kind of see what happens and kind of lift the veil on a lot of the, dark truths that occur, which is not only football clubs, but I would say all sport clubs, on the professional level have a lot of equipment and material that come through their equipment rooms. And a lot of that actually doesn't get used, or if it does, it gets, worn to a point of destruction, and then they can't, donate it. So they end up just throwing it away. So there's, I would say, a mix of materials that get, damaged pretty quickly because the cadence of the athlete using it is very rapid. And then there's a percentage of material that actually doesn't get utilized or becomes kind of obsolete at the end of the season. But for reasons such as changing sponsorship or changing kit colors, a lot of this just kind of gets left behind and becomes discarded, and the clubs can't use it again in the future for commercial reasons and things like that. So there is a problem where there's large pools of material that just become unusable, but they have a lot of value because obviously they're officially licensed. They come from the equipment room. They come directly from, the club, and there's a lot of legacy and history behind it. And so Reboot was essentially a way to solve for this problem. And so we could find a creative solution to bring value back to the club. Reboot has become an upcycling platform for professional sports clubs where we essentially source the material from them. We collect everything that they no longer use, and we partner with designers. And so, yeah, that's what we've been doing up until now.
So you managed to see this problem and you decided to take the opportunity and create a company off of this opportunity. I read that 60% of professional football kits produced is never used and it's actually just destroyed. Was that true at Inter Miami as well?
So I can definitely speak to the amount of material that gets left behind. I think with this topic, it's very subjective to the club. Clubs have different ways of disposing of their materials or utilizing their excess materials. So at Inter Miami specifically, they would try to donate it or, find use for it. And that's why kind of Reboot came in and was an asset to help them upcycle this gear. But I know a lot of clubs across, the world actually do destroy the kit that's left over. And so something else that came up through my research and through my conversations, because I also saw this statistic and it was obviously baffling. But I think there's also a lack of data and information around where this kit actually ends up. And so that's another point that Reboot is trying to bring some insight and transparency to, is actually helping clubs keep track of their inventory, understand the numbers, be able to allow them to visually like quantify how much of their old kit is getting upcycled through Reboot's network, and then from there be able to actually have right percentages and numbers of the actual solution and the actual kind of overturn and upcycling of the gear. But I would say that for a lot of clubs that don't have these resources, the easy option is to just get rid of the kit. So I think, again, I can't speak to that statistic specifically, but I will say that it probably is close to 60% in a lot of leagues. But there are a lot of leagues that are now trying to bring awareness to this as well. And there is a demand for transparency and for creative solutions. So I'm happy that Reboot can intervene at the right time.
And how did your family connection to the club motivate your sustainability initiative? Because now it's top of mind, but back then, no other clubs were focusing on sustainability and waste management.
I would say that, being behind the scenes, not only did I see, massive amounts of equipment coming through, but I also got to see, how the merchandising works of, for example, t-shirts and fan gear. And there's, not a lot of uniqueness when it comes to the kind of retail side and the merchandise side, because leagues like Major League Soccer have, these big contracts with, e-commerce platforms like Fanatics. And so a lot of the clubs have to have similar merchandise and similar gear. And obviously, if they're using a similar kit sponsor, in this case, Major League Soccer uses Adidas across the board, there's very little differentiation across kit styles and things like that. So I would say a main kind of facet of my motivation for Reboot was to bring some creativity and kind of unique one-of-one pieces to MLS and to the offering for fans. So my thinking is, if we have multiple designers working on multiple collections across multiple clubs, we can actually scale the practice versus having one designer try to create 500 pieces.
Absolutely.
So we're really focused on limited collections, up to 50 pieces. Each one is, unique, one of one. And actually seeing that clubs like Inter Miami and other MLS clubs have a lot of gear that they no longer can distribute or can no longer use, and they were willing to give it to Reboot to experiment with. That was, for me, a motivating factor, because I saw that there was a demand and I saw that there was an interest, not only from the club at ownership level, but at the community level and at the fan level. And, people within the club were really excited to see what would happen if, more creativity was brought on the apparel side. So I think with the rising trend of, upcycling and buying things secondhand and vintage jerseys, it all kind of happened, at the right time. And so I think providing fans with a very unique piece that not only has come from the club directly, but could potentially have been worn by, a top player, I think it gives us a massive opportunity to creating impact. And it's allowing the club to participate in a green initiative and a green practice. Having this feedback from, not only my family, but other, ownership, families from across Major League Soccer, it really did help to, kind of cater to what they would want, as well as owners and as kind of, drivers of each club. Every single club is different. They all have different priorities. They all have different targets that they want to hit. And so it really helped to get an understanding of what each club cares about.
I find really cool that you are pioneering this initiative in the industry and that you started with your own family business. I think you should be very proud that it's two things merged together, and I'm sure they are too. So it seems like you work with a lot of stakeholders. Like you've mentioned here, the clubs, the brands, the designers. What's the buy-in process since the first conversation with the club up until the garments are ready to be sold?
Yeah, so obviously this is, something new for a lot of clubs. It's a different way of doing things. And when I approach clubs, obviously what drives them is the fact that there's an amazing story to be uncovered and something that they could leverage as well in terms of green kind of marketing and being a part of a green initiative and having that kind of stamp of approval, but also bringing in younger audiences, creating buzz. Like this is all something that they obviously as a club care about and want. I think when I, present the offering to them, it's not only targeting diehard fans who would, love to get their hands on an upcycled shirt who might have been worn by a top player, but it's also speaking to this kind of broader fashion and circular minded community where they might buy in because they just love the design of the top, or they follow the designer, or they really care about upcycling. So it kind of bridges these two audiences together. From everything I've seen, it's a young audience. It's people that, are willing to spend more money on sustainable and circular products, and who are willing to talk about it and engage with the club and engage with the brand. So I think for them, a big kind of buy-in piece is seeing that the product is unique, that it's going to, draw a different audience for them that they otherwise wouldn't be able to acquire, but also allow them to engage in a green initiative and use that obviously to their advantage. We're also, as a brand, partnering with Avery Dennison, and they're a tech solutions company, and they provide us with near field communication. And it basically is a piece of technology that you tap your phone to, and it props up a URL that's unique to the chip. And from there, we can actually see how many times the page was opened, how many times people shared the link. So we can actually see the engagement with the product. It's basically a way to connect digital experience to a physical product.
Awesome.
So for the clubs as well, it's an amazing, asset, and it's another offering because we can not only bring the story to life and show consumers and fans the behind the scenes, but we can actually in return give the club, data and analysis about, how people engage with the product and with the brand. It is a win-win when it comes to that. And obviously, we're just starting out now, so we take care of the end-to-end process for the club. We want it to be as seamless as possible. We don't want the club to have to go through any trouble any step of the way. So we really help them, from sourcing to then shipping and logistics, to then obviously the product management and creative management of everything. So at this point, every club that we've worked with has been willing to provide us with, let's say, a box or two of apparel or material, because they see the value in actually turning it into something new and upcycling it and making it a more exciting and valuable product. For them, it doesn't really cost them anything.
What's the role of brands? Because you're talking a lot about the club, but obviously Adidas, Nike produced those kits in the first place. Are they also happy to participate in this project, or do they need a bit more of convincing?
That's a great question. So it's something, again, because this is a new process, we've been only now kind of engaging in. So before the MLS collection launched, we did have to obviously have a conversation with Adidas, for example, because they are a partner of Major League Soccer, an important partner. And so we were able to, come to an agreement of Reboot omitting logos and any word marks or signage from the brand. And if we want to move forward, we might have to kind of make this partnership more official, and that's, under discussion. But I didn't do anything without getting a green light first. I want to have more partners buy in and more support, because I think that kind of amplifies the mission and amplifies the impact. I'm interested in partnering with brands such as Adidas and Nike to be able to, again, scale and just have more impact.
Still a lot of things that I'm very interested to talk about. Let's start with the word impact. How are you and the clubs measuring your impact?
So again, because this was a new process and I'm a small team, the idea is moving forward, we will have a way of tracking inventory from the equipment room to the designer studio. And then from there, we can actually backlog those numbers with their initial inventory. So we can actually tell them this percentage of your initial inventory or your initial purchase order from last season is actually being upcycled. And so we're doing it, manually now, but we're hoping to, with Avery Dennison, provide more technology and make this a more efficient and seamless process. But for right now, I mean, we are able to, show them how much was upcycled in terms of like weight and material. And then from there, we're hoping to be able to provide more information and more detail around impact. So not only the numbers of what was actually upcycled, but how that impacts their footprint. So we are working on that. It's, again, taken some time because we do have to obviously go through the proper channels and be present at the equipment room and have like a timeline of when we're going to collect and when we're going to count everything that they have to offer. So we're trying to make sure we can bring as much transparency as possible.
It must not be easy. There's, again, so many stakeholders and so many things happening at the same time that bringing transparency to these, I'm sure it's quite challenging per se. Do you have any aggregated numbers of the work or the clothes diverted from landfill up to date?
Yeah, so with the last collection, which was 6 MLS clubs, we were able to save, I want to say, 1,000 t-shirts. So these were t-shirts meant for a Major League Soccer tournament that there was a typo in the production. And so they couldn't distribute the product, but they also obviously didn't want to burn it, which is typically in the industry something that they do. So they approached Reboot about working with these t-shirts. So we collected them and we actually combined these t-shirts with game-worn jerseys and training tops from the 6 MLS clubs that opted in to participate. So I would say we had around 500 jerseys in total across the 6 clubs that had been used or had misprints or had, stains on them, or for whatever reason they couldn't use them again. So we had 500 jerseys and about 1,000 t-shirts. So from there, we produced 300 upcycled tops. And obviously, we still have a ton of material remaining. But for the timeline that we had, we were able to produce 300 tops, which was a much larger collection than I had anticipated. But because we had so much material, and the designer that I was working with at the time, which are based in LA, they're called Sway Studio. They're amazing. They have, an arsenal of 50 sewers and amazing workers. And so they were able to produce this collection rather quickly.
First of all, congratulations. You've already worked with 6 MLS clubs. That's quite a start already.
Thanks.
What are your scalability plans? So like you've tackled the MLS in the US now. What are your scalability plans so that more and more clubs can use your technology and therefore have more impact?
We are hoping to announce a Premier League partnership in February. So that would be our first outside of the US, which is really exciting. And again, making sure that we have a really tight network of skilled designers in every kind of region that we're working in. So I am building a network of designers here in London, and hopefully I can work with multiple clubs in the Premier League. So we're using this first club as obviously a case study, and really proud of the work. The club is amazing. They're, really prioritizing sustainability and how we talk about it and making it part of the mainstream kind of football culture. So that will be incredibly exciting. I can't share yet, but in January we will announce that partnership. And then I'm hoping to be able to announce a few more partnerships in the next few months with different clubs that will be participating in the Club World Cup in 2025 in the US, and then obviously the FIFA Cup in 2026. So we are, again, focusing on very limited collections and really rich storytelling and leveraging our partnership with Avery Dennison. But the idea is in the next 3 years to have at least, 5 more clubs outside of Major League Soccer that will be part of the Reboot community, and we'll hopefully have at least 10 new designers in our roster. So it's exciting.
I'm so excited to see which clubs you sign. Do you have any dream club? Anyone that you would love to work with?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to work with Real Madrid because it was my childhood club growing up. It was something that I would, share with my father, and it was an amazing experience to go to El Bernabeu and watch the players up close. And yeah, I think that would be my dream club. Also, just because they have incredible legacy and history and have seen some of the top names in the world, and they are a very global brand. So I think working with Real Madrid would be amazing. So hopefully one day. But yeah, if I had to choose a London club, that would be a bit harder because I think they're all amazing, and they all have such passionate fans and global reach. So a big part of my inspiration for Reboot has actually been living in London because the football culture here is unlike any other. And just, again, the history of every single club within London is absolutely amazing, and really represents like the creativity and energy that I think is unique to the city. So
Reboot comes across as an upcycled luxury sports fashion brand. And the most impact will be achieved by the more people that buy the recycled kits. You mentioned you're selling them at what, $200? Do you have any plans to make them more accessible, make them cheaper so that more people can afford them?
yeah, definitely. So I think as we grow this network of designers, and we're obviously looking for talent who prioritize like the quality and the craft behind it, we're hoping that we can, find makers who will have, a team behind them and who can produce more. And that way we can actually lower the price of each top, because obviously production is very expensive when it comes to upcycling. And at this moment, we've only been outside of the US working with designers who are like one man kind of studios. And so obviously for them, it's a lot of work to be able to produce, let's say, 50 tops and then retail them at anything less than 200. So for right now, we're keeping the price point obviously high because it is a piece of art. Essentially, it's a luxury product. But as we expand and we, make more connections in the industry and we find more producers, we're hoping to be able to create a kind of second line of product that would be more accessible and would be less expensive. So yeah, for now we've sold at 250 first collection and second collection 295. But again, these were products that incorporated, match worn kits from Inter Miami and some of the top MLS clubs. So again, there's a lot of history and kind of value behind these products. So as long as we articulate and communicate this, I think it's warranted. But again, we do want to appeal to more people. So we're working on, finding a way to lower that price
Yeah,
point for sure.
absolutely. I'm sure that would be a game changer so that more people can find that the project is addressed to them too, and not only the high-end fashionistas who can afford it. Your first project was with Inter Miami, and as we all know, Lionel Messi is a player at Inter Miami. And obviously, the more you grow, the more that you'll have the opportunity to work with these amazing football clubs that have amazing players that millions of people would die to wear a t-shirt that they have played with. Does this mean that your garments may have a piece of these players? Because I assume that would increase the demand of your products.
It would be amazing to incorporate some of the messy training tops and jerseys into our products. As you can imagine, with top athletes and big names, it is hard to acquire a lot of these products because they are the most desirable products probably in the world. But we are, again, trying to make our way and to be able to have a piece of the club's history and legacy, and that includes tops from these incredible players and incredible names. So we are working that into the system and trying to see how we can just maybe a few tops a season. We're trying to work that out with the clubs, but it would be incredible to obviously be able to incorporate Messi into the storytelling and yeah, just kind of bring this unique access to the fans and kind of have a piece of the club across multiple fans and across multiple tops. So we'll see. I know that I've had some feedback of top Messi fans saying that there's no way you can cut a Messi top and distribute it. But I actually believe that it's almost better that way, and you can give something so special and so unique to more people versus just selling it to one person. So I would never cut up a very valuable special top of Messi's, but if I ever could acquire, a training top or, something less valuable, then I would definitely love to have that be a part of Reboot. It's something we're working on. It's obviously a very exciting proposition and an exciting idea. So we're trying to see how to make that happen.
I would definitely buy one. I would love to be able to say that I have a t-shirt where, like part of it was worn by Messi. I think that would be a major sell. I would like to get your thoughts on the broader fashion industry. You mentioned actually at the beginning of the call that the secondhand, upcycled, recycled fashion industry, it's growing a lot. Actually, while I was researching for this podcast, I read that it's growing nearly 3 times as fast as the fast fashion industry. But the irony here is that the latter powers the former. So while companies like Reboot do a great job at tackling waste, the underlying problem of overproduction still exists. So what do you think needs to change to drive systemic change?
That's an amazing question. And again, something that I could speak to for hours. I don't think there's one specific solution. The obvious solution is stop producing. But of course, these brands basically provide products for the best athletes and the best clubs in the world, and they obviously have gained their reputation and built their businesses because of this quality and because of these products. So I think it's really hard to say, oh, Adidas and Nike should stop overproducing. Again, it's the obvious response, but for every single brand that exists. But at the end of the day, these players and clubs need to get kitted and outfitted by brands. And so I don't necessarily think it's all to blame on the brand. I think it's a collective effort. I think it all starts with not only athlete kind of mindsets, but consumer mindsets. I think if we can find a way to change habits and change the way that we actually interact with products and the way that we dispose of products and how we use them, I think that will then reflect back to the brand, and then maybe they can change the way that they do things. But I do think it's two systems that feed into each other. I don't think the brands are to blame for the issue. I think it's what the consumers do with the product as well, or like how the clubs deal with the product and how the athletes deal with the product. So I think it's a collective effort. Obviously, in an ideal world, brands wouldn't produce 8 colorways a season of a certain boot. And Reboot is not trying to change that or to, damage their business model. It's more so we're trying to fit into the system, to be a partner, to be a catch-all for the products, to make sure nothing ends up in a landfill, and find a solution for everything. I know some things are hard to recycle or hard to upcycle, but if we can collect them and prevent them from being thrown away, I'm happy with that. So again, it's finding ways of doing this collectively, and Reboot's trying to connect the dots and kind of bridge the gap between the brands, the athletes, and the designers, because I don't think there's a lot of dialogue when it comes to end of life of products. So trying to lift the veil and bring awareness to this and make it something that people want to talk about instead of something people don't want to talk about, because I've
Yeah.
actually found that a lot of clubs shy away from this topic, or they don't want fingers to be pointed at them. But like, the truth is, every single professional club has the same issue. It's not, an isolated issue for one club or one league. It's across the entire industry, and there's no one brand to blame either. So I think if we can change consumer kind of habits and mindsets, and also the athlete mindsets and habits, then that can then feed back into the brand, and maybe the brand can change the way that they do things. But ultimately, I believe it's like the consumers that almost like builds the demand in terms of how to change the industry. But the brands obviously dictate how consumers behave, because they're the ones pushing new products constantly. So if we can find balance between the two, I think that there could be wider change and wider impact. It's not going to happen overnight. Upcycling and recycling alone are not going to solve this issue. I think we obviously, as an industry, have to kind of make the shift towards better materials and more biodegradable and just eco materials. But in the meantime, we have a lot of plastic, and we have a lot of like polyester that is already out there and needs to be dealt
Yeah.
with. So for now, we want to be able to upcycle and work with that material, and then in the meantime as well, talk about it and just make it something that is easy to talk about and digest, versus something that is like a taboo. I think that's probably the first step, is just getting everyone to talk about it, because I know a lot of like amateur athletes as well that play football after work, and if their boots are damaged, they literally will go to the park and toss them into the bin. That's a whole other kind of conversation, when you get into just every single person that interacts with sports material and sports gear. But I think doing so at the professional level is the best place to start, because if you take, the top 30 clubs in the world and look at their following, it's in the high millions. And if a top athlete posts something on his Instagram, chances are it's going to spread like wildfire. So I do think the clubs and the players and the brands have a responsibility to talk about it, and to actually try to dictate how people perceive this to be an issue, and how people actually behave. I think that's the starting point. And as well, incorporating younger audiences. They're the future, and they're the ones who are not only going to be future athletes, but they're going to be future, employees of these brands and executives at these brands. And so we need to instill this conscious and responsible mindset into people. And again, I'd love to know what the solution is. I hear a lot of people say that they don't know what to do to be, eco, or to help the planet. It's too big of a problem. They can't make a change. And I think that's very dangerous, because ultimately, if everyone chips in, that's literally the only way to make a change.
I love that idea, because it's true that the more you talk about a complex topic, the easier it becomes to talk about it. And I also agree that this is a collective effort. There's not a single entity or organization that will lead the change. It has to come from all these different agents that work in the sports industry. However, it's true that organizations move slower. Like, brands will move slower because they already have their ways of doing, and their season kits, in their production and their sales targets, etc. However, as individuals, we could change how we act, how we behave tomorrow. So I'm gonna throw a difficult question, but What do you think is an easy thing that fans could do to facilitate change? Fans or anybody that, like has a say or buying power in the sports industry?
I mean, that's a tough one because obviously when you think about going to a match and there's, a merch store and there's a lot of disposable items like just t-shirts that maybe aren't the best quality or keychains or, all of these kinds of things that you would see at a store. I'm not saying that these things are bad. I just think that if you are a more kind of conscious fan, you would probably shop at like a vintage jersey retailer, or maybe if the football club has been in your family for years, you'd actually wear your grandfather's jersey, for example. There's like little things that you can do to just not feed into this constant cycle of buying a new jersey every time it drops, or buying these kind of like disposable things at the store. I don't want to run the stores out of business or say that these things are bad, but I just think there is a type of fan that is more conscious, and that, this new trend of vintage jerseys really speaks to this type of fan. And I think it's been circulating, and it's definitely cool to wear archive jerseys or, vintage jerseys. And there are a lot of platforms out there, resellers, that have really, gained traction and are really popular, and now have a lot of weight in the industry. Like classic football shirts and like Sistema Rosa, they, distribute kind of vintage, really cool archive pieces for these fans that are more conscious and really care about that element of being a fan.
Yeah.
But like I said, it is hard to dictate because fans love merch and they want to wear it and they want to buy it. And so, that's kind of ingrained into the DNA of being a sports fan as well. So I think Reboot is definitely not going to be for everyone. I think sustainability is not going to be for everyone. There are going to be people who just will not change. But I think if, the majority of people do, then that can be,
Yeah.
a great kind of step till these things become government regulations, right? So one day, hopefully, these things will be implemented by law. But until then, you kind of have to hope that people will just make the change. And if people stop buying plastic keychains at the merch store, then maybe they'll stop producing them.
I totally agree.
I don't know.
No, I totally agree with that point. And I love what you said about like secondhand and like resellers and all these platforms. Because at the end of the day, the circular economy, it's growing exponentially. So I would love to see the circular economy moving towards the sports industry as well. I have one last question for you, Gabi, which is I want you to imagine that you're looking into a crystal ball that shows you the future. What do you wish to see in the world of sports, fashion, and sustainability in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think, again, difficult question, but I do think that's something, that would be amazing. And this is more, more kind of a design thing, because I obviously have been researching a lot and I have a lot of kit in my inventory of collecting over the last few years. But I do think like a simple solution would obviously be wearing the same kit for a few years. Like clubs don't really have to change kits for 3, 4, 5 years. I personally don't think so. Um, I think that would be a massive, massive change. I obviously know that it's a commercial it's a commercial decision that obviously generates revenue by creating new kits constantly, and having people want to buy more. But I do think that if we were able to preserve the time frame or the lifespan of a specific kit, it would be amazing. Or maybe alternate it, but bring it back in 3 years. Like just something where we don't constantly have to have new. I think that would be an amazing kind of step forward. That's obviously more of a conversation for the brands and the clubs to have, but I would love to see that. I think it would be amazing, and it wouldn't take away from, the beauty of wearing the jersey or the craft behind it. It would just, make the story a bit longer. That would be amazing. And also if like sponsor logos or different badges that get put on the shirts, if they could be a bit more like removable, like if there was a design kind of change where these things could be stripped off easier, I think that would prevent a lot of waste within the clubs. Because for example, if a club has a front of jersey sponsor for one season, and then the following season they change sponsors, but it's the same kit. They have to basically dispose of all of those kits and produce new ones with the new sponsor logo. So again, if you could take the sponsor logo off somehow, that would, obviously make a difference. And if you're looking at one club specifically, maybe it doesn't make a dent, but if you multiply this across every club in the world, it obviously does make a difference. So I think with the issues in sports clubs, it's not looking at a club specifically, it's actually the accumulation of one small change in a club, multiplying it by every club in the world. Like that's where you actually see the numbers grow, and you realize how important these small design decisions are. But yeah, I guess, my hope would just be that there's less waste of kit that, again, doesn't have to be like obsolete. Like we should be using the kit till its very last drop of usage.
Yeah.
Especially in the professional clubs. I think, again, this is more of a conversation to have with every stakeholder, and it's more of a collective decision. But I just think it's the rapid like overturn of design that is an issue, because at the end of the day, people are going to go to the stadium and they're going to want to buy something, right? But if the brands can dictate what they're buying and not necessarily change things every few months, then you'd actually see some change, I
Yeah.
think. But again, I don't
No,
know.
but you're definitely like thinking about it from the right perspective. And as you just said, everyone needs to contribute to driving systemic change. And I'm sure as society evolves and as we all become more conscious about the planet and what's going on and what can we do individually to make things better, everyone's level of awareness will increase. And I hope that your hopes of the industry become true. Thank you so much, Gaby. I've loved our conversation. I'm very excited for what's to come for Reboot.
Thank you so much. Likewise.